the used market here for the last year and a half, in and of itself, has been pretty crazy, due to inflation and several other factors that have affected pricing, all over the place. But here lately, I've noticed a few trends that are abnormally crazy, even by today's standards. Let's talk about a few of those.
Just play the damn thing.
If you follow my channel at all, you guys know that I follow the used gear market pretty closely, partially because it's my job and partially because, I happen to find it fascinating. I really love examining, trends of what gear is doing, and what people are suddenly after based on market trends. Here's 5 trends that you may have flown under your radar that I've noticed recently and find very, very interesting. Number 1, the BC Rich Stranger Things Warlock. Surprisingly, I haven't talked about this guitar at all on my channel. At least I don't, at least not that I recall. Which is, and I say it's surprising because anybody that knows me knows that I'm a BC Rich fanatic. And this is really the first, guitar that they've come out with in years. That's been at a somewhat affordable price point, but still had some pretty decent specs on it. There's 2 versions of this guitar. There's the USA custom shop version that sells for a brand new. I think you can buy for $4,600. And there's also the limited run of the import versions, which I believe are made in Japan. There's 4,000, I believe, of each color. There's a black color and then the more popular red crackle finish. And these guitars are, they're based on Eddie's guitar on the Netflix show Stranger Things, and that guitar I believe is a mid '80s NJ series Warlock, the actual one itself. Here's the weird thing: the imports themselves sell brand new for $8.99. When they first came out, they sold out like that, wildfire, gone. Once that happened, prices on the used market for these things soared all the way up to, in some cases, as high as $5,000 or $6,000. And some people were actually paying that for them. The problem with people paying that much for them is that these guitars eventually, that first run of guitars was just that, the first run. BC Rich have since released more of that limited edition. 4,000 is an awful lot of guitars. BC Rich have since released more of them. You can to this very day, you can buy a brand new one, at least the black ones anyway, on Guitar Center's website, again for $8.99. The used market, while they weren't available, was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Now that they're back in stock, though, the craze seems to have settled back down, and now they're actually selling for reasonable used prices in the $700-ish range. But that spike up to thousands of dollars was one of the most bizarre things I have ever seen in the used guitar market. Even BC Rich fanatics like myself couldn't figure it out. Number 2, the DigiTech RV7 Hardwire Series Reverb Pedal. This only seems to be affecting the reverb pedal. For some reason, people really want the reverb pedal out of that series all of a sudden. Prices across the rest of the Hardwire series are all still hovering right around the same place they've been for a number of years now. Even the delay pedal, and it's usually the delay that's the most sought after out of a series of pedals like that. So really, what you're seeing, most all the other pedals out of that series are selling for roughly between $50 and $100. Not unusual. The reverb, on the other hand, is selling for upwards of $250, sometimes $300. Really bizarre for a number of reasons. Number one, it's it's kind of like an analog digital reverb. Is the best way I can think of to describe it. It is a really good reverb pedal, but it's not like it's the only reverb pedal out there. Yes, they're out of production, but for a reverb pedal that was originally made in China, and you can buy a version of it from other brands like Boston TC Electronic all day long. This thing is a very interesting phenomenon. $300 for a DigiTech Reverb. By the way, I was going to include the DigiTech Bad Monkey on this list, but that one's pretty obvious, and I just did a whole video parodying that particular phenomenon. So, number 3. The PV 5150 versus 6505 phenomenon. This one is pretty mind-blowing as well. Now, yes, I'm aware that the specific models of, 5150 models are the ones that carry the Eddie Van Halen provenance. But the amps, the 5150s and the 6505s, and and the same is true with the 5152s and the 6505 pluses, are the exact same thing. The only reason that the name changed is because Eddie Van Halen left Peavey, I believe it was in 2004, to go start EVH amplifiers. That was it. That's the only reason. But now you're seeing old 5150s from the 90s that are now bringing upwards of $2,000, sometimes even more. Again, since the great Eddie Van Halen passed away a couple of years ago. The 6505s are still hovering right around the $700-800 mark on the used market. Again, for the exact same amplifier. On the inside, guts are identical. Really, really strange to me. Number 4, the Boss Power Driver and the Extortion pedals. I'll be honest, I'm actually surprised that these didn't catch on sooner than they did. Not because they're great pedals or anything like that. They're not bad. There's I could certainly see where there's a contingent of of players nowadays that might find that might find them very useful, and they do. Both of them do produce pretty unique tones, not just compared to other Boss pedals, but compared to pretty much any other distortion or overdrive pedal out there. These were the overdrive and distortion pedals that Boss released in the mid to late '90s. That was their answer to the Seattle grunge sound. That was basically the inspiration behind it. But here's the thing about those pedals, and the reason why I'm surprised that they're just now starting to take off and climb in value. Those are also two of the rarest Boss pedals that have ever been produced. The Power Driver was made for less than a year, and the Extortion made it for about a year and a half or so. Neither one of them were in production for very long. So, in the grand scheme of things, for non-limited production pedals, both of these are pretty rare compared to everything else. You used to see the Extortion out there on the used market all over the place. 10 years ago, you could find them all day long. Here in the last few years, they've gotten a little bit tougher to find. I remember I actually had to track mine down from a seller an eBay seller over in Japan, and at the time I think I paid about $80 or $90 for it. The Power Driver that I found used at Guitar Center. I think I paid $50 or less for it. Now, the Power Drivers are starting to see go for $150, $175, $180 range, occasionally getting up into 200, and the Extortion is going for just slightly less than that, about $10-$20 give or take, depending on the day. Trends are finally starting to go up on these two pedals. I may do a video about those exclusively here in the coming months, just because they're cool, because they're Boss pedals, and I think they're cool because of that. Oh, and one other thing that's making the collectability on those particular pedals a little bit more rare is the fact these are both made in Taiwan. There's usually with collectible Boss pedals, it's usually the older DS1s and SD1s and, DSD1, stuff like that from the, early mid-'80s. It was all made in Japan. Some of the earlier stuff made in Taiwan, though, is starting to climb in value, which is pretty cool. Number 5, Marshall MF350 Mode 4 head. I happen to love this head. I own one. And the way that I came about one is I had mentioned, I think it was on one of my Saturday afternoon morning live streams, and I had mentioned that I would love to have a Mode 4. Well, a viewer messaged me one day and said that he tracked one down for me, and sure enough, this thing was somebody was selling it for $229. So. I thought that was a pretty good deal even at that time. I looked into it a little bit closer, and that was actually pretty close to what they had come down to from about $400 a couple years prior to that. So not that huge of a difference. But regardless, it was a good deal, so I grabbed it. In the last year or so, though, those things are starting to skyrocket. I checked both eBay and Reverb on this one, and these things are selling for. Occasionally they'll get down as low as $500, but for the most part they're selling between $600 and $800 consistently. $600 and $800 for an amp that was half of that just a few years ago, and a quarter of that even more recently than that. I don't know why everybody is suddenly after the Mode 4, which is, that's kind of strange to me. Is they've always, metal players in particular, have always kind of had a love-hate relationship with them. I really like them, but there's so much gain on those things. Even I don't use it. I don't even. It's of a 4-channel amp. I never go past channel 2, and I like high gain tones. 3 and 4 is just way too much. And that's probably one of the main reasons why that's kind of a polarizing a polarizing amp for metal players. So to see the prices on these things going, getting upwards, 800 and presumably climbing even higher than that. That's pretty interesting. So there you have it. There's my list of current weird trends that I'm noticing in the used market right now. If you've noticed something weird that I left off of this list, don't hesitate to leave it down in the comments below. I would love to check it out because, like I said, I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. Adios.